The rain had finally ceased its relentless assault after 3 days of unnatural downpour. 3 days of water hammering against my windows with such force I feared the glass might shatter. 3 days of thunder that didn't sound quite right, too rhythmic, almost deliberate, as though something massive were walking the sky above our town. I stood in the doorway of my apartment building, listening to the silence that had replaced the storm. It wasn't the peaceful quiet that normally follows rain. This silence felt watchful, expectant. Something was wrong with the air. It hung too heavy in my lungs, thick with moisture that tasted faintly metallic. The familiar petrichor scent was there, but underneath lurked something else, something sickly sweet and organic, like overripe fruit on the edge of decay. I hesitated on the threshold, suddenly uncertain about my decision to venture out, but the walls of my apartment had begun to feel like a prison after so many days indoors. I needed to move, to breathe, to see the damage the storm had wrought upon our little neighborhood. The pavement was slick beneath my feet, reflecting the strange yellow-gray sky in warped, shimmering mirrors. Each puddle seemed unnaturally still, as though the water had become more viscous than it should be. When I accidentally stepped into one, the ripples spread with peculiar slowness, and the water clung to my shoe in thick droplets that refused to fall. Our street had always been busy with neighbors and passing cars, but today it lay deserted. Windows remained shuttered, cars unmoved from where they'd been parked days ago. Even the ambient noise of the nearby highway was absent. The silence pressed against my eardrums like cotton wool. I called out once, "Hello," instantly regretting it as my voice fell flat, absorbed by the dense air rather than carrying. Nothing answered except the sporadic dripping from eaves and tree branches, each drop landing with an oddly amplified plop that made me wince. As I ventured farther from my building, I noticed something strange about the puddles. Each one I passed seemed to retain my reflection for several seconds after I moved on, as though the image of me were stuck to the surface before slowly dissolving away. I found myself avoiding looking down, focusing instead on the unnaturally vibrant green of the waterlogged grass. The path to the neighborhood park curved around a copse of ancient oak trees. Even before the storm, they had always seemed ominous to me, too large, too twisted for suburban landscaping. Now, the leaves hung unnaturally still despite the gentle breeze I could feel against my skin. As I approached, a cascade of collected rainwater released from the branches above, falling across my head and shoulders. It was warm. Rainwater shouldn't be warm. I gasped, wiping it frantically from my face, my neck. It left a slight residue, like diluted syrup. The droplets that had landed on my jacket didn't roll off as water should, but instead spread slowly, seeping into the fabric in dark tendrils. My pace quickened as I followed the mud-slick path deeper into the park. Usually, this was my favorite place to walk. A small but charming green space with a pond at its center, complete with ducks and the occasional heron. Today, it felt like walking into the mouth of something vast and patient. The mud beneath my feet seemed to grip at my shoes with each step, releasing them with tiny, reluctant squelches that sounded almost like whispered words. Twice I stopped, certain I'd heard my name being formed in those wet, subtle sounds. Each time, there was nothing but the random noises of water finding its level. Other tracks marked the path, human footprints that appeared recent, but I had yet to see another person. The footprints all moved in the same direction I was heading, toward the central pond. None returned. The vibrant green of the grass and leaves around me seemed almost hallucinatory in its intensity. The flowers that normally dotted the park in carefully planned beds now displayed colors that hurt my eyes, purples so deep they approached black, reds that seemed to pulse with a light of their own, and they were all turned in the same direction, not toward the veiled sun as they should be, but toward the pond ahead. As I rounded the final bend in the path, the pond came into view. During normal rainfall, it would rise perhaps an inch or two, never enough to breach its artificial banks. Now, it had swollen to nearly twice its usual size, swallowing the surrounding grass in a dark, tea-colored stain. The surface was wrong. Instead of the gentle ripples that wind should create, It displayed an unsettling stillness, like glass or oil rather than water. Nothing moved across its surface, no insects, no signs of the ducks or fish that normally inhabited it, except in the center. There, something broke the surface, a rhythmic disturbance too deliberate to be natural. It appeared and disappeared with mechanical precision. Up, down, up, down. From this distance, it resembled a finger, then perhaps a hand, testing the membrane between worlds. The old wooden observation bench overlooking this scene was occupied. A figure sat with its back to me, perfectly still, clothes and hair dripping as though they had recently emerged from the water. Relief at seeing another person warred with a growing unease as I approached. "Hello," I called. Quite a storm, wasn't it? The figure didn't turn or acknowledge my presence. As I drew closer, I could see it was a man in a postal worker's uniform, someone I recognized from my building, though we'd never spoken. His posture was unnaturally rigid, his hands gripping his knees with white-knuckled intensity. "Are you all right?" I asked, moving cautiously to see his face. When I reached the front of the bench, my question died in my throat. The postal worker stared straight ahead, eyes unblinking, mouth slightly open. His skin had a gray pallor except for his cheeks, which displayed a vivid flush like artificial rouge. Most disturbing was the water. It trickled continuously from his hairline, down his face, dripping from his chin in a steady stream that had already soaked the front of his uniform. His eyes tracked to mine without his head moving, the motion jerky like a marionette controlled by an amateur puppeteer. "The rain," he said, his voice bubbling as though speaking through liquid. "The rain hasn't stopped. It's just changed direction." From his parted lips came not breath, but a thin stream of water, trickling down his chin to join the growing puddle at his feet. As I watched in horror, similar rivulets began to leak from his tear ducts, his nostrils, his ears, water flowing upward from inside him. I backed away, turned to flee, only to find the path behind me now occupied. More people had emerged from nowhere, a woman in a yellow raincoat, an elderly man with a cane, a young couple huddled close together. All stood perfectly still, facing me with the same unblinking stare, water streaming from their orifices in steady, impossible flows. "The rain hasn't stopped," they said in perfect unison, voices creating a discordant harmony of wet, bubbling sounds. "It's just found new vessels." I turned again toward the pond, now understanding the significance of that rhythmic disturbance at its center. It had grown larger, resolving itself into a human form slowly emerging from the depths, rising, dripping, with each appearance coming closer to the shore, closer to me. The surface of the pond began to ripple outward from this central figure, but the motion wasn't natural. The ripples moved too deliberately, forming concentric patterns that resembled symbols or letters in a language I almost recognized. The water surged over the banks, flowing across the grass with purpose, not toward the lowest point as water should, but directly toward me. Behind me, the wet chorus grew louder, my neighbors and strangers advancing in jerky, marionette motions, water flowing from their bodies to join the advancing tide. The metallic taste in the air had grown overwhelming, filling my mouth with each panicked breath. "The rain rises," they intoned. "The rain rises through us all." I ran, feet slipping in mud that seemed to grab at my ankles with deliberate malice. The path that had led me here had disappeared beneath the expanding water. Every direction I turned revealed more figures emerging from between trees, from behind benches, all with water streaming from their bodies, all moving with that same broken puppet gait toward me. With sickening clarity, I realized what the strange taste in the air had been since the rain stopped. Not metal, not decay. It was thirst.